Ma Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pishtai Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskitari Satari Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Di Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam. Hey. Canto 5, Chapter 6, and starting with text 8. And this is, we're going now into the disappearance of the incarnation of the Lord known as Vyāsadeva. So Vyāsadeva has renounced his kingdom, which is now being managed by his sons, and he's wandering like an avadut, not caring for anything really, just in trance. And we read yesterday that the Lord is acting like this. He appears to be a human being who is renouncing. It's a performance. The Lord is acting like this because he's not. The Lord isn't a human being. He's a Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's not born. He doesn't die. He doesn't. But he acts. He appears. He can incarnate and do that. He can incarnate as a human being. He can incarnate as a deity in a temple. He can incarnate in sound. Srimad Bhagavatam is what we're reading, is a literary incarnation of the Lord. And 500 years ago, he invested all his potencies in his incarnation as Lord Chaitanya in the holy names, in a very specific mood of love of God, a mood of separation. So now he's getting ready to disappear. His pastimes and activities have come to a close. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. While he was wandering about, a wild forest fire began. This fire was caused by the friction of bamboos, which were being blown by the wind. In that fire, the entire forest near Kutakachala and the body of Lord Vyāsadeva were burnt to ashes. Prabhupada's commentary: such a forest fire can burn the external bodies of animals, but Lord Vyāsadeva was not burned, although he apparently seemed so. Lord Vyāsadeva is the supersoul of all living entities within the forest, and his soul is never burnt by fire. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Adāyoyam, the soul is never burned by fire. Due to Lord Vyāsadeva's presence, all the animals in the forest were also liberated from material encasement. Text 9. Sukadeva Goswami continued speaking to Maharaj Parikshit. My dear king, the king of Kanka, Venka, and Kutaka, whose name was Arhat, heard of the activities of Vyāsadeva and, imitating Vyāsadeva's principles, introduced a new system of religion. Taking advantage of Kali Yuga, the age of sinful activity, King Arhat, being bewildered, gave up Vedic principles, which are free from risk, and concocted a new system of religion opposed to the Vedas. That was the beginning of the Jain Dharma. Many other so-called religions followed this atheistic system. Prabhupada's commentary. When Lord Sri Krishna was present on this planet, a person named Pandraka imitated four-handed Narayan and declared himself the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He desired to compete with Krishna. Similarly, during the time of Lord Rishabhdev, the king of Kanka and Venka acted like a Paramahamsa and imitated Lord Rishabhdev. He introduced a system of religion and took advantage of the fallen condition of the people in this age of Kali. It is said in Vedic literatures that people in this age will be more inclined to accept anyone as the Supreme Lord and accept any religious system opposed to Vedic principles. The people in this age are described as Manda Sumanda Mataya. Generally, they have no spiritual culture and therefore they're very fallen. Due to this, they will accept any religious system. Due to their misfortune, they forget Vedic principles. Following non-Vedic principles in this age, they think themselves the Supreme Lord and thus spread the cult of atheism all over the world. So, the real path of religion, no one can create religion. The real path of religion is given by Krishna, given by the Lord. He introduced a system of religion and took advantage of the fallen condition of the people in this age. It's interesting, in the age of Kali, how this is mixing, that the Lord, similarly, during the time of Lord Rishabhdev, which was toward the beginning of the universe, seventh generation, from the original created being Lord Brahma, was when Rishabhdev appeared. And at that time, very early on, this king, what was his name? Arha? Something like that. It's just in the verse. Arhat, King Arhat, imitated Lord Rishabhdev. So that has survived all the way down from the beginning of the universe into our present time. So that must be very, very old, Jainism, to come all the way down through the ages like that. But it doesn't make it. It doesn't make it, just because it's old like that, doesn't mean that it's the highest truth. What we see is elements of truth here and there. We don't see the full, complete, absolute truth. We see little glimmers and elements, and that is like reflecting through material nature, a little bit here, a little bit there, of the absolute truth. Just like we see the opulences of the Lord reflected. In some place we may see a lot of wealth, in another person or situation we may see a lot of renunciation, or we may see fame here and there. We see like little glimmers, they're like reflections. But nowhere do we find the totality and fullness of all the opulences, the totality and fullness of the complete truth, except in Krishna. So these imitations and these glimmers and reflections, they have an attractive quality to them because there's a little bit of Krishna there. It's illusory. The other example is like the sun. has so many potencies, especially the heat and light of of the sun. It's radiant energy. But if the sun is reflected on the ground, or on, say, a water pot, it looks like it's the sun, so it has some little bit of attractiveness to it, but it doesn't have the heat and the light and the potency that the sun has. It's just a little glimmer of something else. It's very, very great. So that's the kind of thing that goes on in the material energy. It's just reflections and shadows, and that's why it's illusory. Because the substance of the Lord, in his fullness and truth and beauty, is just a little bit of a reflection. And that keeps the conditioned souls who, bewildered by these things, running after these reflections in the water pots. But the substance is actually somewhere else. So we see a lot of these manufactured religious systems. And they have little glimmers of the truth in them. But the actual substance, the essence, the source, the totality, the Supreme Lord himself is actually just being reflected there a little bit. Text 10. People who are lowest among men and bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord will give up the original Varna ashram dharma and its rules and regulations. They will abandon bathing 3 times daily and worshiping the Lord, abandoning cleanliness, neglecting the Supreme Lord. They will accept nonsensical principles, not regularly bathing or washing their mouths regularly. They will always remain unclean, pluck out their hair. Following a concocted religion, they will flourish. During the age of Kali, people are more inclined to irreligious systems. Consequently, these people will naturally derive Vedic authority, the followers of Vedic authority, Brahmins, Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the devotees. So yeah, it's a choice, which way to go. And in the Kali Yuga, present age, the choice, more often than not, goes for the imitation. And Prabhupada, the verse here says that they will flourish materially. But what good is that? Because there's a beginning and end to material. What kind of flourishing is that? It's just temporary flourishing, like a seasonal thing. You know, the plant grows and then it dies. One of the characteristics of material nature is material body appears, grows, produces byproducts, dwindles, and then disappears. So during that time there can be some flourishing. Lots of fruits and byproducts and lots of growing, and then it dwindles and it disappears. So, and it says that by neglecting the Varnashram Dharma in favor of these imitations, then the principles, the rules and regulations for maintaining cleanliness and self-control, and they remain dirty. They stay dirty. Heart is dirty, mind is dirty, and the body is dirty. Covered. And they become inimical toward the actual path, because they're convinced that what they're doing is the highest thing. And so they reject the Vedas. And they reject the Vedic authorities. They reject the Brahmins, priestly class. And in this way, we miss the opportunity of human life. Bewildered. Prabhupada's commentary. Presently, hippies in the Western countries fit this description. They are irresponsible and unregulated. They do not bathe, and they deride standard Vedic knowledge. They concoct new lifestyles and religions. There are many hippie groups at the present moment, but they all originated from King Arhat, who imitated the activities of Lord Vyāsadeva, who was situated on the Paramahamsa stage. King Arhat did not care for the fact that although Lord Vyāsadeva acted like a madman, his stool and urine were nonetheless aromatic, so much so that they nicely scented the countryside for miles around. Followers of King Arhat went under the name Jains, and they were later followed by many others, particularly by hippies, who are more or less offshoots of Mayavad philosophy because they think themselves the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such people do not respect the real followers of Vedic principles, the ideal Brahmins, nor do they have respect for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Brahman. Due to the influence of this age of Kali, they are apt to concoct false religious systems. So there are always hippies. The variety changes. But there is always that class of human being who can be recognized by these symptoms. And Prabhupada's referring here to, hippies was a term that was used to, in the 70s, 60s, 70s, there was a mass appearance of this hippie consciousness. But it's always there. Like that classic person is always there. They may be referred to a little differently in different times. And Prabhupada's saying that they fit this description of what happened with Lord Vyāsadeva and King Arhat imitated Vyāsadeva. So it's not a good idea to imitate the Supreme Lord. Like sometimes people imitate Krishna, and then we're reminded that, okay, if you're Krishna, then go lift Govardhan Hill with the little finger of your hand. So similarly, okay, if you're a Paramahamsa, just like Lord Vyāsadeva, who of course was more than a Paramahamsa, he was actually an incarnation of the Lord, King Arhat, then let's check your stool out and see how fragrant it is. Oh boy, I don't think we need to go that far. Actually, if anyone ever had any association with hippies, they would know that it wasn't an aromatic fragrance. That was coming either from their bodily excrements or just from their bodily presence. By not bathing, they were not exactly delicate perfume. So that's kind of gross, but there you go. It's just a cheap imitation, just another form of madness or illusion. And in this case, it can be very easily detected. Yeah. Okay, text 11. Low-class people, due to their gross ignorance, introduce a system of religion that deviates from the Vedic principles. Following their own mental concoctions, they automatically fall down into the darkest regions of ignorance. This has to be one of the symptoms of ignorance. Mode of ignorance is illusion. Yes, Prabhupada says gross ignorance, under the illusion that they can concoct some form of religion. I have seen the way. And then others follow them. And they fall down to darkest regions of ignorance. Bewildered. Not taking the actual shelter of the Lord and the Lord's devotees. That's illusion. Prabhupada's commentary. In this connection, see the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16. There's a description of the downfall of the asuras. Text 12. In this age of Kali, people are overwhelmed by the modes of passion and ignorance. Lord Rishabhdev incarnated himself to deliver them from the clutches of Maya. Prabhupada's commentary. The symptoms of Kali Yuga are predicted in the 12th canto, 3rd chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is predicted how fallen souls will behave. They'll keep their hair long, consider themselves very beautiful, or they pluck out their hair, as the Jains do. They will keep themselves unclean, will not wash their mouths. Jains refer to Lord Rishabhdev as their original preceptor. If such people are serious followers of Rishabhdev, they must also take his instructions. In the 5th chapter of this canto, Rishabhdev gave his 100 sons instructions whereby they could become free from the clutches of Maya. If one actually follows Rishabhdev, he will certainly be delivered from the clutches of Maya and return home, back to Godhead. If one strictly follows the instructions of Rishabhdev given in the 5th chapter, he will certainly be liberated. Lord Rishabhdev incarnated specifically to deliver these fallen souls. So here Prabhupada's making the point that it's not by imitating, but it's by following the instructions. So this is a very common occurrence that we see. Not following the instructions, but simply imitating. Sometimes someone wants to be a spiritual master, so they see that spiritual master, like say someone like Prabhupada, was always sitting on a big throne, the Vyāsadeva, elevated seat, and surrounded by so many opulences. So they think, well, that's what a spiritual master is. All they see is something to imitate, whereas the spiritual master internally is on a level of pure devotional service to the Lord. And that's something that can't be imitated and really can't even be seen by anyone. It's very difficult to know the mind and consciousness of a pure devotee, because that's between them and Krishna, basically. So a spiritual master can actually be found in any situation of life. They're not necessarily sitting on a big seat surrounded by a lot of fanfare. Gorkashordas Babaji is a spiritual master of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And his situation was not anything like that. He wasn't actively preaching, he was in total absorption on Krishna. But he was a spiritual master in the line of succession. So we don't always see like that. And if we look at Chaitanya Lila, there were a lot of spiritual masters there, and they weren't recognized simply because they were sitting on an elevated seat. They were recognized because of their devotion to Krishna. So here, King Arhat, he's looking at something that he can imitate. He's seeing with external vision, basically. But by following the instructions of Lord Rishabhdev, then the internal development of devotion takes place. So Prabhupada's saying if one actually follows Rishabhdev by following his instructions, not just imitating going unbathed and unkept and disregarding rules and things, making that kind of a show, but they follow the instructions of Lord Rishabhdev, which were actually very, very responsible life. It was a very responsible life toward others, too, to act in such a way that others could become peaceful, management of society, all these things, the position to protect the position of the Brahmins, to recognize pure devotees, to hear from them. All of this is for advancing in actual devotional, the internal devotion. But unfortunately, people tend to just see externally. Text 13. Learned scholars chant about the transcendental qualities of Lord Rishabhdev in this way. Oh, this earthly planet contains 7 seas, many islands and lands, of which Bharatavarsha is considered the most pious. People of Bharatavarsha are accustomed to glorifying the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his incarnations as Lord Rishabhdev and others. All these activities are very auspicious for the welfare of humanity. Just a brief moment here about Lord Rishabhdev. In one sense, it looks, why did he do that? You know, he gave so many good instructions for responsible management of society, Brahminical qualities, how the varnashram system works, the position of pure devotees and how the saints and sages should be respected and take instruction from them and guidance. So all that's very responsible. There's no craziness or madness or wandering around. So why did he end just before he left the planet? He left, his pastimes were not manifest anymore. Why did he show such unusual behavior, becoming a avaduta and just, and what he was lying on the ground, eating and sleeping in the same place, passing stool. You know, we hear that the stool was fragrant, like pure, but why behave like that? I mean, we can see, you know, people have become confused by that, and they imitate it, and they concoct religious systems. So why do that? Because ultimately, there's more than just the management of society. And Krishna acts in such a way, he can't be imitated, that he shows his extraordinary transcendental position. And that is actually what needs to be realized. And that's the goal of all the management of society and the varnashram, and is to realize Krishna, who's actually beyond all of that. So one way the Lord can do that is by, he sets it all up, and then he completely disregards it. We're reminded of the conversation between Ramananda Roy and Lord Chaitanya. And Ramananda Roy, he offers that Varnashram Dharma is the way to please Krishna. And Lord Chaitanya rejects that and says, you got to go further. So there's different ways the Lord, in his different incarnations, reveals the conclusion. So, but there's always a class of people, sahajya, who will take this cheaply and misunderstand and imitate. But actually the Lord is illustrating something, the highest principle, what the actual goal of life is to realize Krishna beyond anything material. So back to the verse. Read the verse again. Learned scholars chant about the transcendental qualities of Lord Vyāsadeva in this way. Oh, this earthly planet contains 7 seas, many islands and lands, of which Bharatavarsa is considered the most pious. People of Bharatavarsa are accustomed to glorifying the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his incarnations, as Lord Vyāsadeva and others. All these activities are very auspicious for the welfare of humanity. Prabhupada's commentary. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Bharata Bhumate Haila Manusya Janmaya Janma Sartikakar Karapara Upakar. As stated in this verse, Bharatavarsa is a most pious land. The followers of Vedic literature understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his different incarnations, and they're privileged to glorify the Lord by following the directions of Vedic literature. After realizing the glories of human life, such people should take up the mission to spread the importance of human life throughout the whole world. This is the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The word Adi Punyam indicates that there are certainly many other pious men throughout the world, but the people of Bharatavarsa are even more pious. Therefore, they are fit to spread Krishna consciousness throughout the world for the benefit of all human society. Srila Madhvacharya also recognizes the land of Bharatavarsa. Throughout the world, there is no question of Bhagavat Bhakti or devotional service, but the people of Bharatavarsa can easily understand devotional service of the Lord. Thus every inhabitant of Bharatavarsa can perfect his life by discharging Bhagavat Bhakti and then preaching this cult throughout the world for the benefit of everyone. So, Prabhupada is making the call here that how fortunate people have taken birth in the land of Krishna, where Krishna manifests so many times his incarnations and his pastimes in Bharatavarsa. And the Vedic knowledge is preserved there. So he's making the point that this Bharatavarsa is now the tract of land known as India. At one time it was much larger, but it has shrunk down due to the effects of the age. But India has a very special mission for the rest of the world. Like Krishna's emissaries, every Indian. So here, Prabhupada is requesting that every Indian make their life perfect, and to whatever degree they can, to take up the mission of Lord Chaitanya and spread Krishna consciousness to the rest of the world. Yay! Haribol. Text 14. Oh, what shall I say of the dynasty of Priyavrata, which is pure and very much celebrated? In that dynasty, the Supreme Person, the original personality of Godhead, descended as an incarnation and executed religious principles that could free one from the results of fruitive activity. So Lord Vyāsadeva appeared in the dynasty of Priyavrata. Prabhupada's commentary. There are many dynasties in human society wherein the Supreme Lord descends as an incarnation. Lord Krishna appeared in the Yadu dynasty. Lord Ramachandra appeared in the Ikshvaku or Raghu dynasty. And similarly, Lord Vyāsadeva appeared in the dynasty of King Priyavrata. All these dynasties are very famous, and of them the dynasty of Priyavrata is most famous. So the significance of the appearance of Lord Vyāsadeva is no small thing. Prabhupada says that dynasty is most famous. And that appearance was very early on in the creation of the universe. I wonder if it's safe to say that that was the first incarnation of the Lord after the creation of the universe. That's no small thing. First incarnation, the Lord Vyāsadeva. Text 15. Who is that mystic yogi who can follow the examples of Vyāsadeva even with his mind? Lord Vyāsadeva rejected all kinds of yogic perfection which other yogis hankered to attain. Who is that yogi who can compare to Lord Vyāsadeva? Prabhupada's commentary. Generally, yogis desire the yogic perfections of anima, lagima, mahima, prakamya, prapti, isidva, vashidva, and kamavaya sayita. Lord Vyāsadeva, however, never aspired for all these material things. Such siddhis, perfections, are presented by the illusory energy of the Lord. The real purpose of the yoga system is to achieve the favor and shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But this purpose is covered by the illusory energy of Yogamaya. So-called yogis are therefore allured by the superficial material perfections of anima, lagima, prapti, and so forth. Consequently, ordinary yogis cannot compare to Lord Vyāsadeva, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Interesting to consider that in the previous verse, it was advised to take shelter of the instructions of Lord Vyāsadeva. And we heard those instructions all the verses in that chapter were the Lord speaking to his sons. Now, the Lord, I would say to approach the Lord's lotus feet, but the Lord is never approached directly. He's always approached through his devotee or his representative, because they have the devotion, and devotion is what is needed to approach the Lord. So where do you get devotion? You get it from the devotee. So along with all the instructions that Lord Vyāsadeva gave to his sons, they also became the embodiment of devotion to Lord Vyāsadeva. So following the instructions of Lord Vyāsadeva would mean to take shelter of his devotees. So that would be his sons. So we're going to be hearing about the pastimes and activities of his sons also. So that's the mistake of King Arhat, thinking that he could go directly. You can't go directly. You have to go through the devotees and through the instructions. It's King Arhat's mistake. Without actual devotion to Lord Vyāsadeva. So, Prabhupada's making the point here that yogic siddhis, although attractive to some people, are really just material, and the devotee is not interested. The Lord also gave no, was not concerned at all with yogic siddhis. Text 16. Sukadeva Goswami continued, Lord Rishabhdev is the master of all Vedic knowledge. Human beings, demigods, cows, and Brahmins. I've already explained his pure transcendental activities, which will vanquish the sinful activities of all living entities. This narration of Lord Rishabhdev's pastimes is the reservoir of all auspicious things. Whoever attentively hears or speaks of them follows in the footsteps of the acharyas. Following in the footsteps of the acharyas will certainly attain unalloyed devotional service at the lotus feet of Lord Vāsadeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there's a benediction. Whoever attentively hears or speaks of the pastimes of Lord Rishabhdeva, following in the footsteps of the acharyas, will certainly attain unalloyed devotional service, the lotus feet of Lord Vāsadeva. So there's the power of hearing from the devotional source, acharyas. Prabhupada's commentary. The teachings of Lord Rishabhdeva are for the people of all yugas, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, especially Kali Yuga. These instructions are so powerful that even in this age of Kali, one can attain perfection simply by explaining the instructions. Following in the footsteps of the acharyas or listening to the instructions with great attention. That's interesting because in Kali Yuga, you may not even be able to follow the instructions so well. Like some of Lord Rishabhdev's instructions were about Varnashram system, which in this age is very difficult. Although Prabhupada and his spiritual master Bhaktisiddhanta, they made it known that they wanted at least some working model of Varnashram system. But the age of Kali is so incredible that the actual form of religion for the age is to simply chant Hare Krishna. But what he's saying here is that simply by hearing the instructions with great attention, serving the instructions, that's the power of hearing and chanting. And then to whatever degree one can act on the instructions, then that's good. But might not be able to in this age. It's a very fallen age. But simply by hearing the instructions and accepting them, following in the footsteps of the acharyas. If one does so, one can attain the platform of pure devotional service to Lord Vāsadeva. Because devotional service is an internal thing. The pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His devotees are recorded in Srimad Bhagavatam, so that those who recite these pastimes and listen to them become purified. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. As a matter of principle, devotees should read, speak, and hear Srimad Bhagavatam persistently, 24 hours a day if possible. Wouldn't I like that? Yeah. God, give me that service. That is the recommendation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Kirtaniya Sadahari. One should either chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, read Srimad Bhagavatam, and thereby try to understand the characteristics and instructions of the Supreme Lord, who appeared as Lord Rishabhdeva, Lord Kapila, Lord Krishna. In this way, one can become fully aware of the transcendental nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, one who knows the transcendental nature of the Lord's birth and activities attains liberation from material bondage and returns to Godhead. So, yeah, there it is. Prabhupada, it's wonderful. Prabhupada this is his commentary, and he just gives, it's like a blast of a conch shell, just plows through it all, and the essence comes out. As far as following the instructions which were given, if someone follows all the instructions perfectly, but they don't develop that taste for hearing and chanting about the Lord, then that's useless. So that's like the other side of imitating and not following the rules and regulations and acting whimsically. Rupa Goswami discusses that in Upadeshamrita. Niyamagraha, niyamagraha. To follow the rules and regulations just for the sake of following them, that misses the point. And to not follow them and to act whimsically, that misses the point. And the point here is what Prabhupada is proclaiming so boldly, so nicely, is should hear and chant. The pastimes become purified. So part of the pastimes of Lord Vyāsadeva is to impart all these instructions to his sons, who, to one degree or another, will be able to implement them. I'm going to be reading about what took place after this. So this hearing and chanting from pure devotional source is so powerful. And that's the way to approach the Lord, is through the devotion. Text 17. Devotees always bathe themselves in devotional service in order to be relieved from the various tribulations of material existence. By doing this, the devotees enjoy supreme bliss and liberation. Personified comes to serve them. Nonetheless, they do not accept that service, even if it's offered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For the devotees, liberation, or mukti, is very unimportant, because, having attained the Lord's transcendental loving service, they have attained everything desirable and have transcended all material desires. So, just liberation without the devotional service of the Lord, it's kind of like, who wants it? Be no taste, there is no attraction. Prabhupada's commentary: devotional service unto the Lord is the highest attainment for anyone desiring liberation from the tribulations of material existence. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, gaining this, one thinks there's no greater gain. When one attains the service of the Lord, which is non-different from the Lord, one does not desire anything material. Mukti means relief from material existence. Bilvamangala Thakur says, for a devotee, mukti is not a very great achievement. Mukti means being situated in one's constitutional position. The constitutional position of every living being is that of the Lord's servant. Therefore, when a living entity is engaged in the Lord's loving service, he's already attained mukti. Consequently, a devotee does not aspire for mukti, even if it's offered by the Supreme Lord himself. So, striving to get away from material sufferings is like mukti. You want to get away from something. But by going to devotional service of the Lord, you automatically get away from material sufferings. So there's no need to focus on that. It's already included in the package. And to just get away from devotional sufferings, really, then what do? You know? So, devotional service it's all there. All the activities are there. Devotion is there. Krishna is there. Krishna's family is there. Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's activities, everything's there. And getting away from material suffering to boot without any extra endeavor. That's definitely superior than just getting away from something and not knowing where you're going. Text 18. Sukadeva Goswami continued, "My dear king, the Supreme Person, Mukunda, is actually the maintainer of all the members of the Pandava and Yadu dynasties. He is your spiritual master, worshipful deity, friend, and director of your activities. To say nothing of this, he sometimes serves your family as a messenger or servant. This means he worked just as ordinary servants do. Those engaged in getting the Lord's favor attain liberation from the Lord very easily, but he does not very easily give the opportunity to render direct service unto him." Let's see what Prabhupada's commentary is. While instructing Maharaj Parikshit, Sukadeva Goswami thought it wise to encourage the king, because the king might be thinking of the glorious position of various royal dynasties. Especially glorious is the dynasty of Priyavata, in which the Supreme Lord Vyāsadeva incarnated. Similarly, the family of Uttanapada Maharaj, the father of Maharaj Dhruva, is also glorious due to King Prithu's taking birth in it. And the dynasty of Maharaj Raghu is glorified because Lord Ramachandra appeared in that family. As far as the Yadu and Kuru dynasties are concerned, they existed simultaneously, but of the two, the Yadu dynasty was more glorious due to the appearance of Lord Krishna. Maharaj Parikshit might have been thinking that the Kuru dynasty was not as fortunate as the others, because the Supreme Lord did not appear in that family, neither as Krishna, Lord Ramachandra, Lord Vyāsadeva, or Maharaj Prithu. Therefore, Parikshit Maharaj was encouraged by Sukadeva Goswami in this particular verse. The Kuru dynasty may be considered more glorious due to the presence of devotees like the 5 Pandavas who rendered unalloyed devotional service. Although Lord Krishna did not appear in the Kuru dynasty, he was so obligated to the Pandavas' devotional service that he acted as a maintainer of the family and spiritual master of the Pandavas. Although he took birth in the Yadu dynasty, Lord Krishna was more affectionate to the Pandavas. By his actions, Lord Krishna proved that he was more inclined to the Kuru dynasty than the Yadu dynasty. Indeed, Lord Krishna, indebted to the Pandavas' devotional service, sometimes acted as their messenger, and he guided them through many dangerous situations. Therefore, Maharaj Parikshit should not have been saddened because Lord Krishna did not appear in his family. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is always inclined toward his pure devotees. By his action, it is clear that liberation is not very important for the devotees. Lord Krishna easily gives one liberation, but he does not so easily give one the facility to become a devotee. Mukti dadati karhichit smana bhakti yogam. Directly or indirectly, it is proved that bhakti yoga is the basis for the supreme relationship with the Supreme Lord. It is far superior to liberation. For a pure devotee of the Lord, mukti is automatically attained. So that's interesting. Evidently, in glorifying the Lord's incarnations by the different dynasties that he appears in, making those dynasties famous, Sukadeva Goswami was considering that Maharaj Parikshit might feel some despondency that Krishna didn't appear in that dynasty. But he points out that the Lord is so partial to his devotees that when the dynasties or the families that the devotees appear in, the pure devotees of the Lord appear in, are also glorious and famous and remain that way eternally. And that Krishna is so partial to his devotees that he was acting in these different ways as messenger for the Pandavas and involved in their family affairs. And he personally saved Maharaj Parikshit in the womb. So that is also glorious. And Prabhupada makes the point it's actually more glorious because of the element of devotion there. Wherever there's devotee, there's devotion. And wherever there's devotion, there's Krishna. So you're on to text 19. Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vyāsadeva, was fully aware of his true identity. Therefore, he was self-sufficient. He did not desire external gratification. There was no need for him to aspire for success, since he was complete in himself. Those who unnecessarily engage in bodily conceptions and create an atmosphere of materialism are always ignorant of their real self-interest. Out of his causeless mercy, Lord Vyāsadeva taught the self's real identity and the goal of life. We therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto the Lord, who appeared as Lord Vyāsadeva. Prabhupada's commentary. This is the summary of this chapter, in which the activities of Lord Vyāsadeva are described. Being the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, Lord Vyāsadeva is complete in himself. We living entities, as parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, should follow the instructions of Lord Vyāsadeva and become self-sufficient. We should not create unnecessary demands due to bodily conception. When one is self-realized, he is sufficiently satisfied due to being situated in his original spiritual position. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhutta Prasanatma Nasochati Nakankshati. This is the goal of all living entities. Even though one may be situated within this material world, he can become fully satisfied, devoid of hankering and lamentation, simply by following the instructions of the Lord as set forth in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. Satisfaction through self-realization is called Swarupananda. The conditioned soul, eternally sleeping in darkness, does not understand his self-interest. He simply tries to become happy by making material adjustments, but this is impossible. It is therefore said in Srimad Bhagavatam, Mate vidhu swarta gatim nihivishnum. According to gross ignorance, the conditioned soul does not know that his real self-interest is to take shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. To try to become happy by adjusting the material atmosphere is a useless endeavor. Indeed, it's impossible. By his personal behavior and instructions, Lord Vyāsadeva enlightened the conditioned soul and showed him how to become self-sufficient in his spiritual identity. So again, it's not a matter of imitating. See what the internal message is. The internal message is to become self-sufficient, self-satisfied, and not make unnecessary endeavors on the material platform. To become fully absorbed in one's spiritual identity. So it's not simply enough to have the realization that I'm not a material body. I'm not this body. I'm not this mind. It's not enough. That's negating a false identity. But then we need a real identity. And that real identity is as a servant of the Lord. And as we desire more and more to serve the Lord, that spiritual body will develop and eventually become purified from all material get all material entanglements and unwanted things, develop very firm faith, begin to develop a taste for serving the Lord, and as our spiritual identity, we begin to identify with our actual spiritual identity as a servant of the Lord, then we develop love for the Lord. We get a spiritual body. So that's the program. By hearing and chanting, taking shelter of devotional energy as it's coming through the pure devotees, then we're on the path back home, back to Godhead. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 5th canto, 6th chapter, Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Activities of Lord Rishabhdev. Hare Krishna.